what I think is interesting about this whole topic is that w- the five of us are all here because our ancestors had a really good fear response. And
Mm,
if we're honest, fear is one, fear and reproduction are the two strongest drivers inside human beings. And there's a good reason for that. There's a genetic reason for that. There's a biological evolutionary reason for that. And I remember my first job as a legislative correspondent in the state of Idaho. I had a little desk in the basement of the rotunda in Boise, and my job was to cover the legislative session for a public radio station. And I remember seeing debate on bills. And what was interesting is that you knew when a bill was going down when someone threw out something that wasn't necessarily factually going to kill the bill, but from an emotional standpoint, it threw enough doubt into the conversation that people started saying, yeah, I wonder what happens if, hmm. And you could see as the roll call would be going, the votes would switch and shift, and you could see the just a tidal wave of fear just up on the voting board on the wall. And there it goes,
mhm.
it's done. And maybe they would try again the next session. But fear is such a strong driver.
Mark, I want to stay with your comment about the driver of fear, and I want to take us back to our survival instincts. So, a lot of us think that courage is some immediate choice or an indicator of our character. And I don't think we give enough credit to our biology and the fact that our amygdala, its entire design, that's the fight, flight, freeze, its entire job is to keep us safe. You joked about our ancestors, but the reason we are here is probably because our ancestors were like, "I'll be back in the cave, thanks." So one of that things is that fear can be a strategy, but now it's just part of our evolutionary choice. But our amygdala is the most primitive part of our brain, and it's the one that is all about assessing risk. And I was having this conversation with my 20-year-old son yesterday because he's always talking and anticipating, well, what if this happens? Then I should do this. And I was trying to get us to, can we make a decision and focus on what's happening today? Because it becomes such a blocker. But I think with the proliferation of news and social media, like we're driven by kind of fear. Your point about lawmakers and legislatures and crap, voting, everything goes into the what ifs instead of the what nows. And what I honor about this group is the entrepreneurial spirit and the workplace spirit to be able to say, but what if something was better? And so if our instinct is to say, how can I protect something? There's also an element to bring forward to say, but what if we can improve something? So
Wow.
giving the brain credit, but also letting there be room for
Yeah.
choice.
And it really is the fear of making the wrong choice, right? The fear of consequences
Mhm.
that we're really afraid of. If I do this, then oh no, maybe that'll happen, maybe that'll happen, maybe that'll happen. Orlando, I'd love to ask you, you started in call centers
Yeah.
as a young man, a teenager, and you got really good at call centers. And I'm thinking I would be fearful in a job like that because people are yelling at me, hanging up. Take me through the evolution of Orlando and how you dealt with fear and how that led to confidence in call centers.
Yeah, this is a really interesting perspective on it because what Mark means is that right now, if you guys decide to curse at me and hang up, I'll be just fine. Because, because working as a call center agent can just expose you to all kinds of things, and it's like, and so there is like a real fear, right, of what people will say, and what will happen. I think one of the things that's interesting about this is that by going through the experience, one thing you realize is that you're still here, right? No matter how bad things have gone. So, for all five of us, no matter all the challenges and all the things that we've gone through in life, not one of them has killed us because we are all
Right.
still here. And once you recognize that you can get to the other side, even in kind of the most calamitous situation, it kind of gives you some stability in terms of this is actually something I'm moving through. So you like go through problems, but the key word there is through, which means that you're passing through, that you are going to see the other side of this. I actually think, and I think I think you made a great point, Kristen, around like the biological reaction to this stuff, and I want to make a similar point to that, kind of adjacent to that, but I actually think that in leadership and certainly in corporations, and I spent a lot of times working in corporate America, I actually think that there is a we don't train people well in terms of how to deal with like fear or courage. We talk about courage. We talk about having corporate courage, right? You should push back on leadership. You should, not be afraid to be counterintuitive. But the incentives aren't always aligned for that. People who
Yeah.
are pushing back or taking lots of risk put themselves at risk in the company. Where we've kind of trained an entire generation of leaders that you can just be a fast follower. You don't have to do anything. You just wait till someone else does it, and then you try to do it quickly. So, like, I'm in the enterprise software sales space, and when I talk to people, the first question they always ask, "Who else is doing it?" Right? And if the answer to that is no one else is doing it, they're almost out immediately. Right? So there's this kind of this built-in process where we've basically taught people to be like conservative and to kind of avoid these hard situations, but you really only push those down the line when you do that. So I'm a big proponent of like transparency. So like Steve, in your case, where you're going through this with your team, the best thing to do is get the information out quickly. And yes, that's going to be uncomfortable, but it allows people a moment to live in that uncomfortability and kind of work with you for solutions. I find that it's always difficult when people try to not put the negative messages out there. And then so one side of the house realizes the house is on fire, and the other side is like, "Oh, things are just fine."
Yeah.
That never
just
works for
foggy.
creating
It's
solutions.
just foggy in here.
Sure is warm. So,
But Orlando, we don't just teach people that, we reward them for being fast
Yeah.
followers.
that's
I
right.
feel like we have absolutely had a race to the bottom in the law of averages. The risk taking is really for the big billionaires out there trying to go to space, not for the corporate folks
Yes.
Yeah.
or even in academia.
Mm.
So I think that's an important point you brought up.
I was actually going to ask that a follow up on that. I mean, societally, do you think that's becoming more the case that people are conservative and fear mongering and fear inducing than leading, taking action? I tend to think we're going in the wrong direction on that one personally. I don't know if you guys feel the same way or not. I'd be interested to get your perspective.
Yeah, Steve, I don't know if we're going in the wrong direction. I think because of social media, because of access, we can identify how many things are going in that direction. Whereas in the past, there may not have been accurate ways for us to be able to identify that.
Mm.
Another point I wanted to kind of bring up or a thought is that, fear in and of itself is our friend because it wants to keep you safe. So fear is not the issue. It's our response to fear becomes the issue. So what's driving you? What's driving your decisions? Is it that are you fearful of something bad happening? What's the driver?
Mm.
And what's going to be your response? So focusing on our response to fear becomes the thing to do. So are you going to just simply react, give in,
Mm.
or are you going to respond in a way that's going to impact your situation?